What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane and asks the question, what if? I'm your host, Jim Montgomery, and we are officially in the thick of the Super Bowl countdown. Depending on when you're listening to this, we are 4 days or less away. The anticipation is ridiculous. It's through the roof. Just watching the media day, watching some of the broadcasts from Radio Row, some of the just whatever you want to call it. It's crazy. Add to that, the NBA trade deadline is coming up. So like there's breaking news on trades and everything. LeBron just broke the record. It's crazy. But this is a Philly-based podcast. There's only one story right now that actually matters, and that's the Super Bowl. Next week we're doing a recap. Hopefully it's a celebratory one. We'll go over whatever happened. Just a quick housekeeping note before we go on. Every day this month for February on my other podcast, This Day in Philly Sports History, we have been taking a look at key figures, teams, moments, stories in Philly sports black history. And a lot of them have been more of the obscure names and giving you the story and the background behind it to keep their memory and their legacy alive and in some cases just educate people on what's happening. So be sure to check that out every day. It is posted on social media, the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, typically by 8 a.m. unless it's the weekend. Sometimes it might be a little bit later, but definitely worth checking out. And we've been going into a lot of the minute and the detailed stories leading up to the Super Bowl as well. So definitely worth a listen. And I think for some of the key things in Philly black sports history, it's worth going back and listening from February 1st all the way on. So please be sure to give that a like, a subscribe, tell your friends, tell everybody, enemies, neighbors, tell the lady at the grocery store, whatever you need to do, get the word out there. But as I said, this is Super Bowl week, and we are going to the Super Bowl as the Eagles anyway, but as Eagles fans, this is our fourth Super Bowl. We're currently 1-2. We lost in Super Bowl 15 and 39, and of course we won Super Bowl 52 just 5 years ago. And one thing I've noticed a lot with some of the teams that have won Super Bowl, all of a sudden those pre-Super Bowl NFL championships come into play. So at this point, the Eagles are 4-time NFL champions. If you count Super Bowl 52, they won the championship in 48, 49, and 60. They also lost in 1947. So that 47 through 49 team was just a beast of a team. So just one of those things. I mean, most people at this point, the modern era is the Super Bowl, and we're almost getting to the point where anything pre-Super Bowl 15 almost is kind of not. And I know Steelers fans don't want to hear that. Obviously, the Jets don't want to hear that. But it's kind of where we are from a time frame. But we'll take it as it goes. As far as, by my count, Eagles are 4-time NFL champions. But how did we get here? And I wanted to go back and do something different because I've finally been doing this podcast long enough to kind of go back and let's revisit what I did. I believe it was episode 3 at this point. It was our Back to the Future Eagles preview, and went back through my notes, gave it a listen last night, and one, I will say my skill and delivery as a podcaster has improved, but pretty spot on with where kind of different things or different ways this season could have played out. To me, it was fairly simple going back. We had 3 possible scenarios, and the first is Jalen Hurts was the guy and basically came out and played like the leader of this team, took the next step forward, and just stepped into the role as a leader. They gave him weapons and everything like that. So that was the first scenario, and obviously he exceeded expectations. I'll get more into that. But some of the other things for that first scenario, I thought the defense would be improved. I did have some question marks about Gannon and whether or not his scheme would work. I felt he was kind of on the hot seat. There was a lot of us at the end of last season when he was getting looks to be a head coach where we were like, yeah, take him. That's perfectly fine. But since he was back, there were, like I said, there was question marks on there, and I wanted to see what he was going to do with more of his own players and getting more comfortable with his scheme. Because there was at one point last year where he said, "I don't even know what my scheme is." I thought running back was a huge question mark. I thought that Miles Sanders had something to prove. Gainwell and Boston Scott would be good change of pace backs. But I was down on Miles Sanders going into the season, and I thought they were probably going to sign someone in the offseason. But all of that together, I thought they had high – if all of that played out, like if they figured out the running game, if Gannon's defense sort of took the next step, and if Jalen Hurts showed that he was the guy, I thought that there was a very high upside for this team. And I said they could win 10, 11, possibly even 12 games. I thought they'd be the division favorites. They had a shot at the conference championship to win a playoff game or two to get there. And they were actually a Super Bowl dark horse. And I'm saying that as I'm looking directly, as I'm writing down my words that I said. I thought, too, that there was another possibility that if he wasn't the guy, but he did take a step forward, maybe not as big of a step as we thought, that maybe 8 to 10 wins would be doable, and they'd be in the conversation for the division and the wild card. There was a third scenario I threw out there because this is a what-if type podcast, and it's like, what if he took a step back or he wasn't the guy, and where would they be? And I still felt that they'd win 6 or 7 games kind of by accident, thinking that the division was going to be a lot weaker than it turned out to be. At the end of the day, my prediction was, which one was it? And I said probably they'd be somewhere in between scenario 1 and 2. I thought that Hurts, given the opportunity to put the players in place, we knew they had A.J. Brown. I thought that the team should be better. I thought Sirianni was going to be better going into his second year. I thought they were going to take a step forward. I said they could catch some teams by surprise, and I thought 10-7 was probably their likely landing point. I thought they kind of split in the division. There were a couple swing games if they went the other way. But I did think they'd beat out Dallas to win the division and possibly win a playoff game. And I'm more than happy to say I underestimated them from every pick I did, every thought I had, completely underestimated them. We found out that Jalen Hurts is a lot more than the guy. He is a franchise quarterback. He turned out to be an MVP candidate, and he was the favorite before his injury. I don't know now, but he commands the team. Even guys, I was watching some of the media things the other night. Even Fletcher Cox says, listen, and he's one of the more vet guys on the league or on the team, and he flat out said, he was like, when he talks, I listen. And I feel as though Hurts proved to us he is the leader that we wanted Carson Wentz to be, that we always hoped that Donovan McNabb would be. And if Donovan McNabb was, how good we could be. We have that guy now, and we have the team around him. And the way that the team is built and set up, it's built the right way. So, yeah, they're ready to win now, but they also are set up for the future. Would the defense be improved under Gannon? Yeah, greatly. We know all the stats, 4 players with double-digit sacks. Reddick just playing lights out, especially in the playoffs. Just the turnover differential and just how they were just able to not only take care of the ball but force a lot of turnovers. And I questioned his scheme. He did have more of his type of guys for the scheme. I'll be completely honest, he has totally impressed me and proved me wrong time and time again this season. He has done nothing but just really step up. And the fact that he's not getting as much hype now this year, and I don't know whether he was hurt as far as getting head coaching jobs by the Eagles' success, and that just having to wait and all that kind of hurt him. But his adjustments on game day is what really, really turned it around this year. You could tell he had sort of a game plan and a scheme. And he's kind of embraced the role of a Philly guy, too. I don't know if you guys saw, it was on Twitter a few days ago where before the 49ers game, he pulled up to somebody at the one of the red lights near the stadium, and he said we're gonna fucking kill them or rip them apart or something. Like I think he totally got it, and I'm glad to say I was wrong about him. I definitely did not expect this. So the fact that he was able to do that, thank you, kudos to you, Mr. Gannon. Running back, I did say Sanders had something to prove. He was in a contract year, and he went out and he proved something. And whether it's with the Eagles or someone else next year, he's going to get paid. Had 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, making it so they didn't need to sign anyone. And then you had Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott, who were good change of pace backs, but they were in their own right able to do a lot of good things. So that became that question mark I said at the beginning of the season became one of the strengths of this team. A lot of that had to do with the receiving core, but hey, it is what it is. And the whole, I mean, their floor was eight wins, 7 wins. I thought the high point was 12. They went 14-3, so they completely blew my prediction away. And I feel as though as the season progressed, they were no longer a dark horse. They were obviously one of the Super Bowl favorites, despite all the negativity. And I'm still hearing it today. All of a sudden, all leading up to where we are now, it's been, oh, the Eagles are going to win. The Eagles are this. The Chiefs. All of a sudden today, like, everything has flipped. I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden the betting people completely flipped this line somewhat. It was all about the Chiefs today and how the Eagles can't do this and can't do that. But they should be used to that. It's been that way all season. Dallas is the best team. Dallas is going to do this. The Eagles stink. Blah, 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 blah. They're not as good as the Giants. They had the easiest schedule. Jalen Hurts is a system QB, which, ironically enough, I didn't watch the whole interview, but I saw that John Clark from NBC 10 did an interview with Chris Sims, and he's still saying the same thing. He's like, oh, anybody could have stepped in. He had the easiest job, blah, 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 blah. But then those same people are saying Sirianni has a super team and doesn't really have to coach and this and that. Oh, they won't beat the Giants. They won't beat the Niners. And now they won't beat the Chiefs. And you know what? At this point, we're just so used to hearing it. This game can't come soon enough. But I'm glad to say that they completely blew away my prediction and my expectation. And I love the way this team is set up, not only for the game on Sunday, but just for the future and in general. I think just with the contract situation, the draft situation, all of it, they're going to be able to, if they do have to lose a piece, they're going to be able to bring some other people in. So that playoff run, it's basically been blowout city, to borrow Dickie V line. Blowout city, baby. 38-7 against the Giants and 31-7 against the Niners. And everybody's like, oh, Jalen Hurts. He probably more hurt than what we thought, and he's not doing this. And honestly, we're not sure. Maybe it was part of the game plan to not make him throw as much. Maybe the Eagles took what both the 49ers and the Giants gave them. I mean, say what you want about the Brock Purdy and everything like this. That game was tied at 1.77. So the Niners were in that game, and that falls great on that, the number one defense. And, like, I'm still hearing Niners fans. You're seeing the players, Brandon Ayuk, all these guys coming out and talking trash about how the Eagles aren't doing this, how the Eagles aren't doing that. Listen, they did what they had to do to win. And at this point of the game, you don't win points, or you don't win games for style, or get anything for style points or anything like that. You win, you move on. And because of the way they were able to rest guys late in those games, they're set up perfectly where, and yes, everybody had the 2 weeks, but the Chiefs they went to war with the Bengals. So I think that plays a lot into it. So, the playoff run was basically, it was what it was. It was great as a fan to not necessarily have to sweat any of these games. I don't necessarily see that happening in the Super Bowl, but I do think we're going to be in for a much closer game. This is the best team in the AFC. It's not like you're facing a team that is a team of destiny. No, they were the number one seed. They were probably one of the best teams all year. consistently, so it will not be a cakewalk like it was. Now, as far as the Eagles Super Bowl history and my pick, if you want to hear more about my pick and the actual score and things like that, be sure to check out This Day in Philly Sports History Sunday morning. That's where I'll give that out. As far as the history of the Eagles in the Super Bowl, I've covered all of these games also on This Day in Philly Sports History, so go back and check out the dates for these games. But just a quick reminder for everyone, Super Bowl 15, they were blown out by the Raiders. And to me, that was they should have won that game. I believe they were favorites. I'm not real sure on that. I should probably look that up. But to me, that team had its Super Bowl when it beat the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. For so long, that was the benchmark, was we got to beat Dallas. We have to beat the Cowboys. We've talked a lot about this on this podcast. The guy that you always see on NFL films, Dallas, we hate you. Well, guess what? I don't know about the fans, but for that team, I think they finally beat the Cowboys, and it was more difficult for them to get up for the Raiders. Super Bowl 39, I think that score ended up saying, like, it made the game seem closer than what it was. Sure, it was tied until the third quarter, but that fourth quarter was all Patriots. You had McNabb, whether he got hit by Brewski, whether he was hungover, whatever was happening, McNabb was not right, and Andy Reid, whether he covered for him or Donovan was slowing it up, whatever it was, like they lost a lot of time on that one drive to get within 3. And this team too, I think, probably because they had lost 3 straight and this was their 4th one, I think getting over the hump and getting to the NFC Championship game took a lot out of that team. And for them, it was, and you could see, like, everybody was sort of, and it could have been Spygate or whatever, but everybody sort of was sluggish. Like, I watched some of the highlights, and, like, it just seemed like they were just, and Westbrook aside, because I don't know, like, he wasn't there for all 3, but, like, and T.O., like, those guys were the only ones, and everybody else, it seemed like they were kind of content to finally have gotten to the Super Bowl. Whether or not that was the case, I don't know, but that's just kind of my perception of it. And then we know what happened in Super Bowl 52, the legend of Nick Foles, one of my all-time favorite games to watch still to this day. I'll go back and watch it from start to finish. I can tell you what the commercials were. Like, it's crazy. But hopefully we have more of that, because this team is hungry. They're saying the right things. They look like they're poised. So we'll see what happens on Sunday. But if you want more on the history of the Eagles in the Super Bowl, be sure to check out This Day in Philly Sports History. All right, so let's break this thing down a little bit. And let's go position by position and see where the edges lie. And at quarterback, I think you have to give the edge to the Chiefs, just because Patrick Mahomes has been there before. Talent-wise, he's one of the best in the game right now. They're both banged up. They're not on the injury report. And this is not by any means a knock against Jalen Hurts. It's just, like I said, Patrick Mahomes has that experience. He is one of the best in the games. Not that Jalen Hurts is not. I think you have to give the edge at quarterback to Mahomes. Running back, between Sanders, Gainwell, and Scott versus Pacheco, McKinnon, and Rojo. Also, CEH is activated for the Chiefs, but he hasn't played since Week 11, and he had lost his spot to Pacheco anyway. I think you give the edge to the Eagles here. It's one of, like I said, the question mark for me coming into the game was the running backs. They ended up being one of the strengths of this team. And I think between that offensive line and these guys being able to kind of rotate in, their ability of all 3 to catch the ball, I think you got to give the running back edge to the Chiefs. Wide receiver, I don't even think it's close. AJ, Devontae, Quez, and then on the Chiefs side you have Juju, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, and Kadarius Toney, who all of them are kind of banged up, with the exception, I think, of Valdez-Scantling. And you give the edge talent-wise. You give the edge to the Eagles on just on the receivers, but they also have the injuries concern. But if they were all 100% healthy, I would still give the edge to the Eagles on the offensive side. And keep in mind, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes, but the Eagles' secondary is no slouch either. So definitely an edge for the Eagles at wide receiver. Tight end, I mean, I love Dallas Goedert, but Travis Kelce is an all-timer, if not the best. I don't know if he's quite there with Tony Gonzalez yet, but I mean, if he's not, he's pretty damn close. Definitely give the edge to the Chiefs for tight end. Offensive line, I'm going to give the edge to the Eagles, no question. This is one of the best. I've seen so many different superlatives for this Eagles offensive line. The best of the century, the best in the past 20 years, which still would be in the century basically. But just how good they are. They are the best unit in the league. They're about as healthy as you could expect your offensive line. Lane is banged up with the groin, but I mean, he's just a trooper. Landon Dickerson has the elbow, but again, there's no way he's going to miss this game. The Chiefs don't have a terrible offensive line, but when you put their offensive line up against the Eagles' defensive line, I mean, look out. And you give the offensive line edge to the Eagles. So let's just switch the defenses. I brought it up. Let's start with the defensive line, and I don't even think this is close. The Eagles get the edge based on their depth. They're going to be able to rotate guys in and out. I've seen Fletcher Cox talk about how rested and like just good he feels because of the rotation they have. And I think that's, to me, is this matchup right here. The Eagles defensive line versus the Chiefs offensive line is the key to this game. As long as they're able to get constant pressure on Mahomes, and you're not going to be able to blitz Mahomes that much, and that is key because of the Eagles having that much depth on the defensive line. They're able to play a straight up alignment, and you trust your secondary against the receiving core of Kansas City, but because of that, you have your linebackers then able to really limit the big plays by Kelce. He's going to get his. He's going to eat, as they like to say. But what you need to do is keep everything underneath and don't let him get behind you. Once that happens, that's when you're going to start running into problems. And granted, he's one of the all-time best to play the position, so it's easier said than done. But if you're able to get consistent pressure on Mahomes and make him uncomfortable with your defensive front, you're in great shape because you're not going to have to blitz and you're going to be able to have those guys stacked there. For the Chiefs, Chris Jones is a stud, but the Eagles have the depth and they've played outstanding all year. They're borderline like a historic defense. And I think if they can somehow pull off this win against the Chiefs, we're going to see this could be one of the top maybe 10 teams ever, if not better, to ever win a Super Bowl because of that defense and just how historic it is. And as far as Chris Jones versus our defensive line or our offensive line, we've given up no sacks to guys like Michael Parsons, Bosa. So like it's not like we're strangers to stud defensive linemen and defensive ends. Like we've played them and we've held our own against them. So hopefully that will be able to kind of neutralize him because they don't have much as far as, oh, these guys are great, these guys are this, behind Chris Jones. So I think that is the other key. Like, this game is going to be, and I know it's very cliche and old school, it's going to be one in the trenches. And I think our offensive line is better than their defensive line, and our defensive line is better than our offensive line. So take what you want with that. But linebackers, we're going to give the huge edge to the Eagles. I mean, Reddick and TJ Edwards have just been playing lights out, and they're going to need them to help contain Kelce. But if they're able to get that pressure from the defensive line, then it allows them to do what they do. And even if you send Reddick, TJ Edwards is good enough to sort of contain. As long as you're not letting Travis Kelce beat you deep and get behind you as a linebacker, I think that's going to be the key. I don't care if he has 12 catches for 84 yards. As long as you're keeping him in front of you and his average is under 10 yards a catch, perfectly fine with that. Secondary, again, I'm going to give the edge to the Eagles. Avonte Maddox is still showing up on the injury report, but I think he's going to play. He's expected to play, which I think what that does is allows you, between him, Slay, and Bradbury at corners, and then you allow C.J. Gardner-Johnson to do his thing. You're able to, again, because of how banged up the Chiefs wide receivers are, it allows them to sort of keep an eye on Kelsey and keep him in check. And as long as they're able to lock down the wide receivers, you just can't let him get loose. Keep this guy in front of you. And part of that's going to be on the secondary. Part of that's going to be on the linebackers. Don't let him get loose. Special teams, you have to give the edge to the Chiefs. For me, and if you followed either of the podcasts for any length of time this season, you know, to me, the one weak spot on this team that makes me the most nervous is our special teams, especially our return game. We've not really done much this year in the return game. Not that we've really had to. So, I mean, it's kind of is what it is. Like Jake Elliott has only attempted 6 field goals all season and none in the postseason. Part of that is Sirianni's aggressive nature. Part of it is they haven't had to. They've been able to score touchdowns, and they've been put in a position where they can go for those fourth down conversions because of the way they've been driving. And that's not Elliott's fault, but he's experienced. He's made big kicks in the postseason, regular season, and the Super Bowl. So in a game like this, it could come down to a field goal, and I think Jake Elliott is a very decent kicker. I'm fine with him with the game on the line. I mean, I have to give the edge at kicker to Harrison Butker, though. So I give the special teams edge to the Chiefs. I truly hope and pray that this game does not come down to special teams and we can just let that our offense and defensive line do their thing and just dominate. The intangibles, the things you can't see, I feel like you have to, I'll call it even. Because for coaching, I'm going to give a slight edge to the Chiefs. And I know this might sound crazy, but I've seen it for 14 years here in Philadelphia. And I've seen it even with Patrick Mahomes on his team in Kansas City. For all of the conference championship appearance, all the Super Bowl appearances he has, Andy Reid only has one championship. He has never been, and at this point in his career, probably never will be a good big game coach. And that could be the wild card factor in this. And yes, it's going to come down to the offensive and defensive lines. But if you have to throw a wild card that you just don't know, it's Andy Reid as coach. Yes, regular season, all of that. I'm giving him the slight edge because of the experience. But the Eagles have made adjustments all year when they had to. Andy Reid, we all know, and like I said, we've experienced this. He's stubborn as hell. So you kind of mess up those 15 scripted plays. He will not deviate from them until you go through that. So if somehow we can force a couple 3-and-outs, score 7, 10, 14 points, all of a sudden you're in a good spot. And we've seen that from Andy time and time again. And I like the guy. Appreciate everything he's done for us, but I've seen it. I mean, he's been to 5 NFC championship games, 1 Super Bowl, didn't win anything with the Eagles. This is now his 3rd Super Bowl in Kansas City. They've won 1, and they've lost how many AFC championship games? So, and I don't want to throw the reverse jinx or anything out there and have Andy Reid end up being the MVP of the game, but I mean, don't get me wrong. He comes up small sometimes in big spots like this. And we know he's stubborn and doesn't adjust sometimes. And that's where the Eagles are good. And on that, they're hungry. Like, if you see any of the interviews with this team, if you see their mentality in the locker room, like, they're all about one day at a time. And they've been like that since dating back to last year. But it's one game at a time, one day at a time. And the fact that Jalen Hurts has such a command of that locker room and that team, and they all listen to him from the first year rookies all the way up to guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. That's saying something. And I don't know. They're hungry. And what did Jalen Hurts say? He said hungry dogs run faster. I'm fucking starving for this shit. So I think you can't underestimate the fight that this guy has. Like, he's got that mentality. Like, he got benched in the college football championship game. So, like, he's dying to prove that he is a clutch money player. So I do look for him to have a much better game than he had throughout the playoffs because of the time off and just that fire that burns inside of him. And they're better at all positions. I mean, I'll give the Eagles or the Chiefs the edge at quarterback, tight end, and maybe kicker. Maybe kicker. But other than that, I give the Eagles maybe Chris Jones. But I mean, from a position standpoint, the Eagles are better at all positions except for kicker, returner, quarterback, and tight end. And they're hungrier. So that's going to be huge. And they're better at the two biggest positions that are going to affect this game no matter what, especially with two banged up quarterbacks. Like, I'd rather Jalen be behind our offensive line with a hurt shoulder, and I'd much rather us go after Patrick Mahomes with our defensive line with him being on a high ankle sprain, because nobody's going to tell me he's magically going to be healed all of a sudden. He's going to be in pain. So I don't know. And I feel like I'm not ready to go on record to make an official pick yet, but as long as they don't make mistakes, which for the most part this year the Eagles have not made many mistakes. When they've made their mistakes is when they've gotten into some of the close games. You take the New Orleans game out because that was Gardner Minshew, but why did they lose that game? He threw them untimely, like throwing 3-4 interceptions or fumbles or whatever he was doing that game. The mistakes cost them. The Washington game, they weren't crisp. They weren't on point, and that's why they lost. Even the Chicago game, they were a little sloppy, and that's why it was close. So as long as they can limit the mistakes and force the Chiefs into some, because Mahomes, it's not like Mahomes doesn't throw interceptions. It's not like they don't turn the ball over. As long as they can limit their mistakes and force the Chiefs into some, I can't see them not at least keeping this close and possibly winning. Even if they get down somewhat a little early, they've shown that they're able to get punched in the mouth. If you remember the Jacksonville game, which that game turned out, they ended up being a pretty damn good team this year that came out, smacked the Eagles in the mouth, and the Eagles came back and won. Oh, and about that record and their schedule being so weak, they've played 10 teams out of, 19. So 10, like 50% of their games, which I would imagine is probably about average. And they're 9-1 against teams with winning records, including the playoffs. So sure, their schedule might be weak, but you can only play who they put in front of you. And the fact of the matter is, the Eagles are beating who they put in front of them, and they're beating the teams that have winning records. They're beating teams in the playoffs. So say what you want about that schedule. They're 9-1 against those teams with winning records. And I don't know what more you want. Like, that's pretty goddamn good. And again, I'm not making the pick now, but I can tell you this. There's probably no way I'm going to pick against the Eagles anyway. So if you want to know what my pick is, and I'll give you the score versus the spread and everything, tune in Sunday to This Day in Philly Sports History. But I have to say, if they were not my team, based on the matchups and the breakdown, my lean right now is still the Eagles to win. I'll get more into the spread and everything on Sunday. But I don't know, man. Like, if the Eagles play their game, which they've shown all season that they're capable of doing, I mean, that's my lean. Like, and yes, they're my team, and yes, I'm biased, and yes, I'm bleeding green and drinking the Kool-Aid and whatever other cliche you want to have. But I'm giving you an unbiased breakdown right now, position by position. Tell me what position, other than quarterback, special teams, and tight end, what position are the Chiefs better than the Eagles? I'll wait, because you can't give me one. So tell me who you got. Send me a message, comment, give me a like, tell your friends. I want to know who everybody's got. Eagles or Chiefs. Am I being too much of a homer right now? to think that the Eagles actually have a shot, because I'm hearing a lot of people say the Chiefs are going to blow them out. Ask Brandon Ayuk. He said, "Oh, yeah, I'm not going to talk about him." But then there he goes on a 20-minute rant about the Eagles. But I'm not going to talk about him. So be sure to comment, like, subscribe. Tell me who you got. Check out, like, subscribe, back to This Day in Philly Sports History, as well as this podcast, Back to the Future, wherever you get your podcasts. Definitely want to help that algorithm out. Be a good way to kick off Super Bowl week. By last pod, we set a record on YouTube views, so I want to continue that trend going. So subscribe, like, comment. I want to start interacting with some of you guys. I got some big things in the works for the next couple weeks. So be sure to like and subscribe so you're in the loop. YouTube, TikTok, Twitter at Jimbo Mont, Instagram Philly Jimbo. If you're on Facebook, look me up, Jim Montgomery. I'm working on possibly getting a Facebook page for the pods. I just don't know how I want to work that yet. But it's Super Bowl, baby. Get excited. Let's go, Birds. When I see you next week, we're going to be celebrating a win at Super Bowl 57. Hopefully. Don't want to jinx it. This is New Philly, but it's the Super Bowl. This isn't the World Series. This is the Super Bowl. So I just want to make sure I play my cards right. But it is New Philly. So hopefully, if they win, I might have something special for next week's podcast live. And we'll leave it at that. But go. Have yourselves a week. Enjoy the game. Go Birds. Let's fucking go. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.